In this video, I just want to talk about how I keep my ponds clean and how I do my maintenance. Every pond's a bit different, but hopefully this video will give you some tips that will help you make your pond maintenance nice and easy. G'day, my name is Kev. The aim of my channel is to help people build and maintain ponds without spending a fortune. If that sounds like something that interests you, you might like to subscribe and check out my website, ozponds.com. Over time, sediments are going to build up inside the pond. This will be things like decaying plant material, fish food and fish poo. Bacteria and microorganisms will do a good job breaking it down, but even they have a life cycle and will die and decompose inside the pond. And you'll be left with this detritus or mold. It's kind of like the dust in your house. It just continues to build up. If you leave it indefinitely, it will continue to build and feed more plant growth and more fish growth. And of course, that will lead to the creation of more sediment. Eventually, it will become sludge and get thicker and thicker. So once the pond starts to look like this, I like to get in there and remove some of the buildup before it gets too thick. My preferred method of removing sediment is to get in there with a small aquarium net and scoop it out. If you're not too keen to get wet, don a pair of waders or get a small pool net on a pole. A small net lets you get into the little nooks and crannies and doesn't get too heavy like a large net would. I also like the net because it saves water. I could use my pond vac and suck up most of this material, but when I do that, I lose a lot of water. I find if I do this a few times throughout the year, I never need to fully drain the pond. One of the reasons that I rarely need to remove water to clean the pond is the way that I prefer to circulate water through the system. The water is drawn into a skimmer bucket. The pump sits inside this skimmer bucket. This draws in the majority of the surface debris before it has a chance to sink inside the pond. A coarse filter sponge stops chunky debris being sucked into the pump. From the skimmer, the water is pumped into an upflow bog filter, and then it's returned to the pond via a stream. An upflow bog is my favourite type of biological filtration. This pond's using my bog in a barrel design. I do have lots of different bog filter designs, and there's lots of ways you can customise them to suit your situation. I'll link a playlist in the description if you're interested, but one of the important design features of the bogs I add to my ponds is that they're super easy to clean. And so what's happening while I'm netting the pond, I'm stirring up lots of that fine sediment. The bigger, heavier stuff I'm collecting in the net, but that fine stuff just starts clouding up the water. And the cool thing about the skimmer is that it's sucking all of that stuff in. And it's taking it up to the bog filter and depositing it there. Another important design feature of the bog is that it has a slow water flow that allows solid particles to settle out in the base of the bog. It also has void spaces to provide an area for this waste to accumulate. On this particular design, I also have a flush out valve that I can open to remove all that accumulated muck. All my larger ponds I design with basically the same type of circulation. Water's pulled into a skimmer or an intake bay and then moved through a biological filter, more often than not an upflow bog, like the bog in a barrel design. One of the things I love about the bog filters is that they only need to be flushed and cleaned once a year. Sometimes I even do it every second year. The small skimmer buckets that I use, I'll clean the sponge maybe once a month. Whereas the intake bays like this one on my dream pond, I'll net up the build-up maybe once a month if I'm lucky. More often than not, I hardly ever do anything. And remember, nothing too big can reach the pumps because they're protected. In the small skimmer bucket, the pump is protected by a coarse sponge. And in the intake bay, it's being protected by rock and smaller pebbles. So only the really small, fine stuff can get through, and then that should settle out in the bog, where it stays until I clean and flush it out. Remember, if you want to see how any of these filters and ponds were built, check out some of the links that I'll put in the description. I try not to use any additives or products and just rely on the naturally occurring bacteria and organisms that are present in any natural body of water. I just help it along by providing circulation with purpose. I also try not to overstock the ponds with fish, as that can easily overwhelm the ecosystem. Just enough that I get enjoyment watching them. Less fish also means I don't need to constantly feed them, as they have plenty of natural food within the pond. And they also serve a purpose munching on algae and will serve as the apex predator within the ecosystem, keeping any one species from dominating the pond. Anyway, I feel like I've gotten sidetracked again. So at the moment it's winter here, and as you can see, all the leaves have fallen into the pond. Now, if I wasn't so lazy, I could net all of them out, or I could even be proactive and have netted the entire pond. But after living with these ponds for quite a few seasons, I have faith in my filtration and my methods. That material will break down, and I may get a little algae, but that will feed the fish through winter and into early spring. Over the winter, I will flush the bog, but I'll leave the pond alone. And when the weather warms up, I'll hop in there with my trusty net and scoop up as much of the sediment as I can. And that's pretty much all I do year in, year out. I should also mention that in early autumn, I gave this pond a better than normal clean, as I needed to remove a heap of the eelgrass. To do that, I used my pond vac and I dropped the water down to about 20 centimetres. In that situation, I also gave the rocks and the gravel a little flush with the hose, and when filling it back up, I used a dechlorinator. That just instantly neutralises the chlorine and chloramine. The chlorine and chloramine are there to kill bacteria. In our ponds, we need bacteria. Even though I removed so much water, I didn't remove the fish or completely drain the pond. During the big clean out of the pond, I didn't touch the bog filter at all, so there's still plenty of good bacteria up there, ready to colonise the pond. Anyway, I hope this has been a helpful video. If it was, I don't mind if you give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See ya.